There's still one more big-time 2025 recruit to talk about here on the Portal Podcast.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal news. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. And today we actually have somebody to discuss in recruiting that's part of the class of 25, although he did reclassify for 26. And to help break all that down is my good guy, John Garcia Jr. from Rivals.com, national recruiting analyst. Mr. Garcia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Of course, we are talking about VariFlowers. He's from Miami Northwestern, a player you and I were talking about not that long ago. He's going to be a top 100 guy in 26. Where do you rank him? Blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden he's class of 25. You broke it that he recently took a visit somewhere that was a little surprising. You can give as much or as little as you want on this, but take it away, sir. What's going on, Mr. Flowers?
Well, yeah, imagine reclassifying as an All-American and saying, hey, you know, in 5 or 6 weeks, I want to not only be decided, but I want to take all my officials in that span. So, yeah, Javari had a list of 6 finalists, but you just knew over the course of not only logistically trying to take all these trips, but just in terms of interest from the player, from the family, from the camp, and the schools themselves, trying to navigate 6 visits in a 6-week window is incredibly tough. And naturally, there were changes to the list. And I think we expected maybe a trip or two to get canceled. And that has happened. You know, Georgia was canceled. Syracuse was last weekend. That was canceled. So you knew there was going to be a natural rise for certain programs on the list. Florida, Auburn, Miami's got them on campus right now. But in the midst of those cancellations, we find out not only did a new school get involved, but he actually took the trip and completed an official visit with Notre Dame, which is an extreme dark horse, wild card, whatever you want to call it, with VariFlowers, because they really weren't involved for quite some time. So I think on one front, it shows you the chaos and complexity of a reclassification and late breaking decision for a true blue chipper. I mean, All-American at Under Armour, 10-4 guy in the 100-meter dash. Everyone understands why Javari's coveted. So you understand why there could be some late movement there on that front. But on the other side, the brand power, right? The recent history of a Notre Dame, I think really, especially at that cornerback position, I think really flexed its muscle in this late play for Flowers, whether they win the recruitment or not, to show the interest, get on the phone, get the visit set up, and the visit to have been taken. That alone is a tough hill to climb. And by all indication, everyone's first impression of South Bend was really strong, to the point where I would argue, sitting here today, and again, that last visit to Miami is not complete, I would argue if Flowers left the state of Florida, I do think Notre Dame would probably be the pick. Now, North Carolina's in there. We mentioned Auburn feeling good earlier in the spring for this recruitment. But I think right now, if he were to leave Florida, I think the Irish would actually, you know, be the front running school, which is something that obviously nobody was talking about even a week ago. So this is a true, legitimate late play from Marcus Freeman, Coach Mickens and company up in South Bend. And look, why not, right? You're a hot program. You're fresh off of a national title appearance. You are clearly developing the cornerback position well. I mean, Leonard Moore was one of the best corners in the country as a true, you know, freshman, a teenager out there, you know, covering, you know, the elite recruits on the other side. So, you know, I think all of that really resonates with Flowers, who is a competitor. I think there's really no question about that. You assume as much when you talk about a South Floridian, a corner, a guy who runs track. You got to be competitive, right? This is the best of the best at the skill positions in particular. But I think that interest is really reciprocated with Notre Dame. But no doubt, you know, I think Florida is in a great spot. And Miami, obviously, getting the last visit as the local program, you just know it's going to be tough, you know, for anyone to not only compete with the Hurricanes, but overcome them, you know, when it comes to this March 31st decision date that Javari has set. So it is game on. I think a lot of chips are moving back and forth here, But, the big news is not only are Florida, Miami, Auburn all in the thick of it, but Notre Dame is very much the dark horse to keep an eye on in this race.
Juwan Sider came over to Notre Dame from Penn State. He's got ties to South Florida. He's from Belgrade originally. He's known to recruit really well in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. How much do you think his involvement now being with the Notre Dame staff impacted this race?
Well, when we thought Jabari was a 2026 recruit, we saw him at Under Armour around the new year. The hot school in his recruitment was Penn State, which is where Sider, of course, was. That was one of the main contenders for him as he was going to methodically go take some trips in the spring. So no doubt Sider makes an impact. And when you talk about being a great recruiter, it's not about just the consistency, the identification, all that. It's really the close. Can you get the kid on campus? Can you get the kid across the finish line? And those are two areas where Sider, one-on-one, regardless of position, is one of the top, 10 or 15 guys in the country, maybe individually.
I would argue he's as good as it gets. I told 𝐓𝐡𝐞 that about a year and a half ago, because Penn State in my lifetime had never recruited Florida with any success at all. And then Sider shows up there, and slowly but surely, all of a sudden, kids start taking visits, and kids started committing to Penn State. And they've always been more of a regional school in regards to recruitment. And they've done a great job doing it that way. But again, Flowers, to my knowledge, I don't think Notre Dame had really messed much with them at Northwest. It's just crazy. And all of a sudden he visited. So this kind of goes back to something you and I talk about all the time. Recruits pick coaches far more than they pick schools. I know a lot of the diehards for any particular institution don't like hearing that, but that's just across the board. There is no in between with that. It's really a big deal. John, next up, speaking of kids that are elite recruits and ones that we think has made a decision, we're not really sure how to label this, but even off the air, we weren't really sure how to label it. Tristen Keys from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, arguably the nation's number one wide receiver. He recently committed to the LSU Tigers. But then right after, he goes and takes a visit to Ole Miss. After he visits Ole Miss, you start to think, okay, Kiffin's offense, their history with receivers, especially bigger receivers, and Tristen's 6'3". Is this a situation where LSU's just really the leader, even though he's committed, or am I reading that wrong?
Yeah, this recruitment has, ebbed and flowed aplenty in the last, even just the 6 months, right? I mean, I think everyone recognized the talent of Tristen Keys, even dating back to last offseason. Everyone remembers sort of his OT7 run that he had. He had a great, a Rivals 5-star event. Just a great offseason last year, and he was even better as a junior down in Hattiesburg. And then coming off of that, another underclassman who was an All-American that we saw in Orlando. And Tristen was talking about an early decision. He was talking about, hey, I've been recruited. I think I can get this thing done in the early spring. I think he was talking January or February at one point. And at that point, LSU, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Bama, those were sort of the main schools in there. Ole Miss, of course. And all of a sudden he takes some trips. Boom. He pops off the board to LSU. But right before that, he had talked about slowing the process down, taking all his officials. I think he scheduled several official visits. So it was going to elongate again towards the summer months. But he took a trip to LSU, and that's one of the schools that has remained in the thick of it for quite some time. And we know what Cortez Hankton and company have done at that position over the last few years, especially. And you understand why he jumped on board. And by the way, don't look now, LSU's got the best receiver group committed in this 26 class. 4 4-star or 4 blue chippers, 1 5-star, all in the Rivals 250. I mean, just an absurd group of 3 Louisianans. And then you add Tristen Keys. That's the ideal out of stater when you're talking LSU. But look, he's a 5-star. This is the type of kid who changes your program, right? So you understood that this recruitment was not going to be over. And for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, this is the number 1 kid in the state. I mean, this is the type of battle they've not only contested with, but have won year after year since Kiffin has been in Oxford. So you always think they're in the running for the top guy, but when it's a receiver, it's got extra juice, right? If it's a receiver or QB, that is Lane Kiffin's battery right there. So you just understood that, if you're an LSU fan, you celebrate that commitment and you enjoy it, but you know that he's going to probably frequent the state of Mississippi and the University of Mississippi in particular. Look at last year with that number one recruit, Deuce Knight, right? I mean, how many visits did he take despite being committed initially to Notre Dame? And then even after he flips to Auburn, I mean, he took 2 or 3 more trips to Ole Miss down the stretch. I mean, it's just when you're in that state, you've got that pull. But I think for Keys, he's such a national recruit that you could understand why a Texas or a Bama is going to continue to swing big here for him, despite that LSU commitment. So, Ole Miss gets him on campus just a few days after that LSU commitment, but they certainly won't be the last program to do so. So it is 2025. This is recruiting. You've got to win early. You've got to win in the middle, and you've got to win with 8 months left, 8+ months left until National Signing Day. It just is what it is at this point. LSU knows that. They're prepared for that battle, and it will be one because Tristen's as widely, polished and viewed highly, I think, unanimously at this point, in the class of 26. So that is not a huge surprise that he took in that trip to Oxford, and there will be more to endure from the LSU faithful. So buckle in for that one.
LSU knows what you're talking about, and Alabama suffered that last year's Caleb Cunningham. He flipped to Ole Miss, and he was the number one receiver in state and was, I would say, probably top 3 nationally as a receiver. He was elite. I know you guys at Rivals have Caleb, very highly regarded, and the same thing in regards to Tristen. I think he's your number 1 receiver nationally at Rivals.com, if I recall correctly. But it's an elite group again this year, so for him, it's quite an honor. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Texas A&M. They've had an unusual start to their recruiting run this year. John and I are both a little bit surprised by that. That is next here on the Portal Podcast. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. For an instance here, you can look at it from how much you were spending on food delivery and all the little things that just add up to pull away from your account. Also, you can start using that app for you and your partner, so you know what all the money's going towards, and you can keep it in one place so you're both on the same page. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. Texas A&M. John, when I say California, I don't usually talk about A&M as being a major recruiting play. When I talk about Georgia, I don't talk about the Aggies with recruiting. But to start this year, they've gotten, and it's not that they don't get good players out of those places, they've started much differently than usual, and they actually had at one point just one kid from the Lone Star State committed, and then on top of it, that kid decommitted. There for a while, the Aggies had a top 10 class, and it was a class without somebody from the state of Texas. That is about as bizarre as it gets in the recruiting world. There was a class, I don't remember what year it was, early 90s. They didn't have a kid outside the Lone Star State. I mean, that literally, and it wasn't like a number 28 class. This was a top 10 kind of class. The Lone Star State is loaded. In your opinion, is this just a brief trend and they're going to kind of head back in the right direction? And we'll talk about the running back they just got, but is this just an aberration, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think it was just kind of a funky early cycle trend. Look, Texas A&M has to recruit Texas well. I mean, it's as simple as that. You would say the same thing for USC in California, Florida State, Miami in the Sunshine State, so on and so forth, right? You've got to recruit your home state when you are in one of the big 3 or 4 states, in this country. If Georgia is not doing well in the Peach State, you're probably not going to go on this run that they've been on under Kirby Smart. So you understand that regardless of coaching staff. I will say Mike Elko is a little bit more outside the box. I do think his travels, his experience, his ability to develop has pushed his recruiting footprint national. And then you throw in the SEC appeal, you throw in the NIL appeal of a Texas A&M, and yes, you can go out and recruit from California to Atlanta and down into Florida. Absolutely. So I do understand why they had a bit of a run outside the footprint, but you knew just, it would balance out as time goes forward. And I think, when you zoom out on the class in 3 or 4 months, when you get through summer official visits, there's gonna be a lot more Lone Star State power in that group. But again, this is recruiting, right? I mean, you can go on a run that feels as conventional or unconventional as possible right now. It could be one big weekend, and we saw that with Texas A&M early with that California splash, and then later with that Atlanta area splash of recruits that they started winning out for, the Carters of the world, Aaron Gregory's of the world. It could start to snowball in a very positive way. So you get a couple of those like they did, and yeah, you're up there in the rankings. And then you're looking around saying, well, wait, there's no locals on this list. So you just knew that was going to, eventually, take care of itself. And now, Hatton's on board as an elite running back recruit. And you understand that, Texas A&M is going to have a lot more, in-state wins here going forward, just because it's that time of year. Spring football's back. Official visits are around the corner. A&M is going to have a lot of talent on campus as per usual. And now they get to foot the bill for those trips. So I do think that there's going to be a lot more, closer to home gets for Mike Elko. But you also understand why, hey, if everyone else is going to recruit nationally, and you certainly have to win at a high level, you understand why you saw a bit of a run or two outside the state.
I agree with that. And it's interesting that now that they got the rivalry back with the University of Texas, like every year that whoever has the home game between those two, that weekend visit list and the weeks leading up to it and the kids talking about it adds something else to it. And I just remember growing up with that stuff because those two schools obviously dislike each other about as much as you can possibly dislike each other. So that makes it even more fun. When we come back, John, we're going to talk about the ramifications of an early spring coaching situation that is unfortunate, but how it impacts not just that institution, but a whole bunch of schools all around the country. That is next here on the Portal Podcast. We're all about the stats because numbers do not lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear, wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and even everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. For those that did not see, or even if you did, Stanford has relieved Troy Taylor as the head coach at Stanford. There are allegations that are very unfortunate. The word that I saw was bullying. I'm just going to leave it at that. That's kind of self-explanatory. But here's the ramification I look at it from as somebody that's a recruiting analyst, and I know you thought about it too. You've got recruits that you just signed. The Cardinals signed 18, including Hank Bachmeier, who's one of the better quarterbacks out west, class 25. You had several transfer portal guys are graduates, this, that, and the other. And then you got returning players. That doesn't even count the athletic trainers, the assistant coaches, all the administrators, back office staff. This is massive. So first we'll talk about players, but we'll get into the coaching part of it too. Andrew Luck put out a statement. Good luck to him. We're looking for a coach, blah, blah, blah. But is this just going to be a fire sale? Because Stanford's a different kind of place. Like academically, that's a whole different animal. I don't think a lot of the kids there will automatically jump ship like they might at some other programs. But are we going to see 5, 10, maybe more players decide to leave the Cardinals?
Well, you would understand it if they did, right? I mean, this is the team and the battery you signed up for was, yes, Stanford and all of the great academia that comes with that. But also they signed to play for Coach Taylor. So right or wrong, in his actions and the decision that came after it, that's the coach that you signed up to play for. So for those 18 recruits, you understand if there is a bit of a change of heart. But you would also understand the other side. Hey, let's see what happens. The portal is fluid now, but it'll be fluid later as well. So you would understand a little bit of a conservative approach from those recruits on their end. And then for the current players, yeah, I mean, who's to say? I mean, they've got a 30-day window. It's a total different game, right? They've got a 30-day window to truly explore, and that means they can begin communicating with some of these other colleges 2+ weeks before the normal portal window opens. So you could basically go to practice, which I think they're still conducting spring practice, get out of practice, go to locker room, peep on your phone, and well, here's 3 colleges that are like, hey, what are you doing? Are you sticking around? You willing to take a visit? I mean, this is a different time because of the window in which this went down. So on one end, you understand why there had to be a decision, but on the other, you just know, yeah, this thing could be blown up to the core, and Stanford could be one of the, you don't want to call it tanking, but it could be one of the true low bar programs ahead of this 2025 season in a bizarre and wide open ACC. It's almost par for the course.
Yeah, I could see Stanford being the team that ends up being, how do I put this? Maybe they start okay because the players are going to have something to play, like something to prove, but their depth's not going to be the same. Andrew Luck said in his statement, he's now the GM. For those that don't know, he's now the GM at Stanford. Of course, he played there for the Cardinal. That they may hire internally. This depends, blah, blah, blah. They're looking for the, it's fluid at best. But most importantly, they just don't know. If you're a parent, you're a parent, like, those are not words you want to hear when your child is involved. So if they're in the middle of the semester, you let the kid finish out. But like some of these kids are practicing to try to send out film probably to other school. Like it is awkward.
Yeah, think of the recruits, right? They don't do early enrollees, right? So
those kids,
all those kids aren't even there yet. So that's 18 kids that are like, well, I got my dorm, picked out and all of that, but I don't arrive for another 2 months or 3 months. How do you handle that part of the process as a parent? How do you even, try to say, hey, like we need to sit down and reassess this thing? So just a crazy scenario because of the time that it went down. This isn't November or December. We're almost in April at this point. So just something that you don't typically see. And, a little March Madness in football because, I don't think a lot of people were talking about this more than a few days ago.
It's wild. It's just absolutely wild. It's one of the reasons you and I both love covering football the way we do, looking at it from a roster management standpoint, but it's also disheartening. It's like, wow, the reason for this is just gross, but this is how you have to adapt. Stanford has a chance here to if they make the right hire, and I zero idea what they're going to do short-term, long-term. Maybe they do internal for a year or whatever, but they got a chance to make something happen long-term. But in the meantime, there might be a player that is maybe a starter at Stanford, at least would have been, that transfers to a school somewhere else that helps them get into the college football playoff. This is all hands on deck. Every staff, as you and I know, has people in the back office looking at other teams. Like it's just reality because they're predicting who's going to get in the portal. They hear discussion. They want to know. I guarantee you there's not a P4 school in the country that hasn't had a discussion about Taylor being let go. Not one.
Right.
Because there could be, it's not like any of them are going to have academic problems getting into your school, first off, because it's Stanford. Secondarily, it is a P4 school. They got some guys. So one or two of these guys are going to enter the portal. I guarantee that everybody wants off that roster. And then again, your point, it's ironic that Stanford doesn't do an early enrollees because that would first week of June or whatever, they'd probably get there. But now some of those kids may never make it to Palo Alto. It's just a matter of who and why. The backstories out of this will be great in a year or two, but for now, just know that college football is wild and anything is possible. John, where can everybody find your work, my friend?
Yeah, real simple. Rivals.com. Check us out. Big camp down in Miami this weekend. We're really excited about it, and we'll probably talk about it on this here show next week.
Absolutely. I love hearing about the Rivals camps because nothing like one-on-one competition, man. There's nowhere to hide. It's the best of the best. You can find the Portal Podcast wherever you download your pods, Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, you name it. It's always going to be an opportunity for you. And of course, it's on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. We will see you again soon.